Welcome to Music Legendarium. Today, when you drive through Laurel Canyon, the place seems almost surprisingly ordinary. A narrow, winding road moves through the hills above Hollywood. Houses are hidden between trees, slopes, and quiet side streets. At first glance, nothing suggests that this was once one of the most important places in modern music history, and yet, in the 1960s, Laurel Canyon became the birthplace of a cultural and musical revolution whose influence can still be felt today. America was changing rapidly. The Vietnam War divided the nation. Young people questioned the values of their parents. The civil rights movement gained strength. Protests against the war became louder, and a new generation began searching for different ways of living. Out of this atmosphere, the hippie movement emerged, and Laurel Canyon became one of its musical centers. Unlike Beverly Hills, Laurel Canyon was not yet an exclusive neighborhood for millionaires. The houses were relatively affordable, the area offered privacy, and at the same time it was close to Hollywood, the recording studios, and the entertainment industry. For musicians, this was an ideal combination. More and more artists moved into the hills above Los Angeles. What followed was unique. Musicians visited one another, played guitars in living rooms, exchanged ideas, and often worked spontaneously on new songs. Many of them knew each other personally. Doors were open, and casual meetings sometimes led to successful albums or even new bands. Among the best-known residents and regular visitors were members of the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Mamas, and the Papas, and later Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Frank Zappa also lived in the canyon and became one of the most colorful and unconventional figures of the scene. One of the most famous bands connected with this world was The Doors. Jim Morrison was, in many ways, very different from many hippies of the time. While others sang about peace, harmony, and community, Morrison was fascinated by freedom, rebellion, and the darker sides of human nature. Songs such as Light My Fire, People Are Strange, Break On Through, and The End made The Doors one of the most important rock bands of their era. Their music was darker, more mysterious, and more theatrical than the sound of many other Laurel Canyon artists, and yet The Doors belonged to the same creative atmosphere. This was exactly what made Laurel Canyon so fascinating. It was not a place with only one sound, one style, or one idea. It was a meeting point for very different personalities. Some were dreamers, some were rebels, some were poets, others were experimenters. Together they created something that had not existed before. Another central figure was the Canadian singer-songwriter Joni Mitchell. Many historians today see her as a kind of musical chronicler of Laurel Canyon. She observed the people around her and transformed her impressions into songs. Her album, Ladies of the Canyon, is still considered one of the most important musical documents of that period. Few artists captured the atmosphere of the neighborhood as precisely as she did. The Monkees also had connections to the canyon. Although the band had originally been created for a television series, several members moved in the same circles as other musicians of the time. Michael Nesmith, in particular, later became an important figure in the development of country rock. Even the Beach Boys were part of the wider musical environment. Brian Wilson, the creative genius behind many of their greatest successes, was never fully part of the Laurel Canyon community in the same way as others, but he moved in the same musical universe. Musicians, producers, songwriters, and band members constantly crossed paths. This created a creative energy that was rare, intense, and highly productive. The music that came out of Laurel Canyon was new and different. Folk, rock, country and psychedelic elements began to merge into a style of their own. The lyrics were no longer only about love or entertainment. They reflected the hopes, fears, and dreams of an entire generation. Songs such as California Dreamin', Monday, Monday, and For What It's Worth became anthems of their time. Millions of young people identified with this music. But Laurel Canyon was much more than a musical meeting place. Many of its residents shared similar ideals: peace instead of war, freedom instead of conformity, creativity instead of material success. Many believed that a better society was possible. The famous Flower Power movement did not begin exclusively in Laurel Canyon, but the music from the hills of Los Angeles became one of its most powerful soundtracks. With this new freedom came another development, one that would later have serious consequences. In the late 1960s, the use of marijuana and LSD spread increasingly within the counterculture. Many artists believed that these substances could stimulate creativity or expand consciousness. LSD was even seen by some as a kind of spiritual tool. It is true that some of the most experimental albums in rock history were created during this period. At the same time, however, a dangerous development began, and for a long time its consequences were underestimated. Psychological problems, addiction, and destroyed careers became more common. Many musicians paid a high price for their lifestyle. Today, many historians see the hippie era as one of the important starting points of a drug culture that later spread across large parts of the United States. The dream of freedom had a darker side, and not everyone survived it unharmed. In 1969, the movement reached its peak. The Woodstock Festival became the symbol of an entire generation. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered for 3 days of music, community, and idealism. Many artists who performed there or who had shaped the movement were directly or indirectly connected with the musical world around Laurel Canyon. But while the world was still celebrating Woodstock, the end of an era had already begun. The Vietnam War continued. The political climate became harsher. The early euphoria slowly gave way to disillusionment. Then the Manson family murders shocked California. Charles Manson had moved for a time in the wider environment of the Californian music scene. The residents of Laurel Canyon had nothing to do with the crimes, but the shock was enormous. Many people suddenly looked at the counterculture with different eyes. For many historians, the Manson murders symbolically mark the end of the innocent hippie era. In the following years, the artists went their separate ways. Some became world stars, others disappeared from the spotlight. But the influence of Laurel Canyon remained. This can be seen especially clearly in the story of the Eagles. Glenn Frey and Don Henley met through the Californian music network that had grown around Laurel Canyon. Out of these connections came a band that would later make music history with songs such as Take It Easy, Desperado, and Hotel California. The Eagles took many elements of the country rock style that had developed around Laurel Canyon and made them popular around the world. Even today, Laurel Canyon is considered one of the most important places in modern music history. It was not only the birthplace of many classic songs, it was also the birthplace of a feeling, an attitude, and a cultural moment that reached far beyond California. The music influenced generations of artists and shaped the development of rock, folk, and country rock in a lasting way. Perhaps this is the true meaning of Laurel Canyon. It was not simply a point on the map. For a brief moment it became the creative center of a generation that believed it could change the world. Whether that hope was fulfilled can still be debated, but there is little doubt that the music of that time did change the world. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.